Hello and welcome, I'm Alas Garajuk and you're watching Head to Head with UATV. The German parliament is considering a document which describes a new strategy for resolving the war in Donbas. It is called Peace in Ukraine Needs a New Impulse. The document consists of 12 points. It is proposed, among other things, to send an additional UN civilian police force to eastern Ukraine and to develop an action plan concerning the Minsk agreements. To discuss this, we welcome to our studio today Maria Kucherenko, analyst at the Center for Civil Society Studies. Hello and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So let's discuss all possible aspects that could benefit Ukraine in this peace-building plan or also concern Ukraine. So what is your take on this document? Because as far as I know, we do know the 12 points, but we don't know much details about them. How to evolve, how this project was evolved into the whole roadmap of restoring a peace in the east of Ukraine.
Yeah, first of all, I need to say that we haven't even seen this document as a document, not as a part of a build article, not as a part of a discussion in Germany, in the Parliament of Germany, not as a part of discussion in other media and so on. We just know that German Democrats got such plan, Free Democrats, I'm sorry, they got such plan, and this plan is sort of additional measures to fulfill the Minsk agreements, and they actually said that Minsk agreements should be supported by this plan of actions, which actually need to be fulfilled in direct correspondence to the document, and they said that all of us need a sort of harsh frame of the fulfillment of Minsk agreements. They said that all of us need deadlines to fulfill points of Minsk agreements, and we need sort of restriction to party which will not fulfill its obligations according to the Minsk agreements. But here we need to turn to the text of Minsk agreements, to the complex of measures, to the Minsk II. In Minsk II, as a second party, we got the separate areas of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, not Russian Federation. But Renata Alt, the representative of Free Democrats of Germany, always said that we need to enforce Russian Federation and Ukraine to fulfill Minsk agreements, and it's sort of a contradiction here. And Russian Federation, I'm sure for 100% they will not allow us to avoid a discussion about who is the second party of conflict, and they, as always, they will say that, oh, it's not us, it's not our problem, we just influence on the side of separate areas of Donetsk and Luhansk areas, and it's our role, and that's it.
Well, what can you tell us about timing? Why is this plan being mentioned only now?
You know, it's quite interesting issues, because here we got combinations of a few cases. Here we got, from one hand, we got a presidential election in Ukraine. We got the result of presidential election in Ukraine.
Probably there's going to be a new strategy from Volodymyr Zelensky.
New president, new strategy. It's a sort of popular point of view on the situation.
Defend the country, I'm sorry.
And from the other hand, we got Russian steps as a passportization of occupied areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions.
So there is some escalation.
Yeah, there is some escalations. And the third point, last but not least, we got the 5 years of conflict. A lot of conflictologists just said us that if the conflict upcoming the border of 5 years, it have a huge risk to be frozen, and I think that all of people who are just trying to propose something new developments around our Minsk agreements, our other formats to actually our other formats which
Normandy format, right?
Yeah, and so on.
So they're trying to move the process, yes?
Yeah, they're trying to move the process from this,
to prevent from halting this.
Yeah, to prevent the frozen conflict in Donbas. And to my mind, this plan will will not lead us to some real steps to
some effective measures taken.
Some effective measures to solve the situation, because again we got non-working Minsk agreements, which was mentioned also by Renata Alt, and on the basis of these non-working agreements we are trying to improve to implement some steps which are based on these non-working agreements, and it's sort of logical mistake here. How actually how we should enforce Russian Federation to
comply with the
with this document in our understanding, not in their understanding by the letter of this document.
Right, because there is a constant demand that Ukraine and Russia should adhere to the Minsk agreements. Ukraine is the one who is adhering. We all know that Russia is not participating in any kind of dialogue, so what is the point, right? But it is very interesting to me, does this participation of Germany have any connection to the construction of Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline? Let's just remind the audience that this pipeline would deliver gas from Russia directly to Germany, bypassing Ukraine, and basically it downs and drowns Ukraine's economy. Well, Germany is a strong supporter of this business deal with Russia, of this gas deal with Russia. Do you think that now with this message, Germany wants to keep this image of a strong supporter of Ukraine's sovereignty?
That's a good and essential question. In these developments, we need to remember that Germany is really one of the sides which are trying to implement in our reality the strategy of business with Russian Federation as usual. And from the other point of view, we got this permanent tryings to implement some new plans, more dialogue, more constructions, which led us to peace. But still, if we are talking about these developments around the Free Democrats' plans, we need to remember who is the leader of Free Democrats. It's Christian Lindner. He is notorious by his speeches about Crimea, about his point of view that he actually said that he just verbalized what everyone is thinking in Europe, that Crimea should be put out of the agenda and we need to focus on Donbas and the annexation of Crimea as a fact of reality, and we need to deal with this. And
this has always been alarming to Ukraine to hear such statements, and it is very strange that now Free Democrats developed this plan on restoring peace in Donbas.
And I need to underline here that in a plan of Free Democrats, in that information which we got about this plan, we haven't noticed even any word about Crimea, about Russian annexation of Crimea. But actually, one of the hugest mistakes of our today's peace settlement, we are just trying to avoid some harsh discussion with Russian Federation, because they will avoid a dialogue, they will close the door and so on. But we don't need to be too polite, because we need to observe all this question, the annexation of Crimea and the occupied areas of Donetsk and Lugansk oblasts in one basket, because it's one complex of Russian aggression. It's Russian-Ukrainian war, and it should be Ukrainian position in these developments.
Completely support you in this. The other interesting aspect in this plan, among the 12 points that we know about it, is the possible deployment of the UN peacekeeping mission in Donbas. What is your take on this? Because as far as I know, the interesting thing is that the mission would be deployed on the border between Ukraine and Russia and not on the contact line, which basically is the demand of Russia. So this aspect could be a positive in the eyes of Ukraine, or not?
From one side, yes. It's one of the positive moments of this plan. I mean that these German Democrats are planning to deploy the UN mission on the border between Russia and Ukraine. It's corresponding to a position of Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But still, first of all, we need a sustainable ceasefire to deploy some peacekeeping mission. I mean, to keep peace, we need to have peace in practical aspect of our war, not in two parts of paper as the Minsk agreements actually is today. And we need here we need to be very, very correct, and here we need to be very conscious about any discussions of the UN peacekeeping mission, because we need to remember that Russian Federation still have the right of veto, and it will be a huge destructional factor to implement any UN mission.
Well, yes, it is going to be hard to deploy the UN peacekeepers in Donbas. But still, let's see how the situation is going to unfold. We can never know. But what are your expectations on this possible UN peacekeeping mission? Do you believe that it really can restore peace in Donbas?
You know, I'm quite skeptical about UN peacekeeping missions and about their successes, because nowadays it's quite popular to discuss the experience of Eastern Slavonia, Baranya and Western Sirmia, the part of Croatia which was bordering with Yugoslavia. But to my mind, after my visit in Vukovar, which was reintegrated to Croatia in peaceful way, not in the way of military operation, I don't think that this experience was quite successful, because nowadays in Vukovar we got a huge division between local Serbs and local Croats, and it's still quite painful to them to discuss this issue, especially the issues of peaceful reintegration. It was a really harsh dialogue between this UN administration, local Croats and Serbs. And I don't think that it's even reliable to even can be comparable to Ukrainian situation, because in Serbia and Croatia they got a huge ethnical factor of aggression. It was ethnical and religious factor, and in Ukraine we even don't have such factors in our conflict. It's not a conflict based on religion. It's not a conflict based on ethnical factors. It's a conflict based only on Russian Federation understanding of the post-Soviet space, and it's conflict based on the Russian Federation vision of itself as an empire.
But still, the fact that the United Nations would get involved into this fight against Russian aggression in Ukraine, maybe this would be kind of stronger and positive message towards strengthening the Ukrainian position on the international agenda. Maybe this could result into some messages on stronger condemnation, maybe stronger sanctions. But let's see. The interesting thing that I would like to mention and I would like to discuss with you is that this plan calls for the dismissal of the governments of the DNR and the LNR, occupied territories. And the management of these regions would be transferred to the civil transition administrations under the leadership of the United Nations. So there would be this potential involvement of the United Nations. How effective and helpful would you see this measure?
You know, again, we should return to the case of Slavonia, Eastern Slavonia. It was the same experience in Croatia when the UN administration is making a government in these areas which was reintegrated to Croatia in a peaceful way. But still, we don't have Yugoslavia here. We have Russian Federation with nuclear weapon, with will to annexate territories of bordering countries, with will of producing new conflicts all over the world. And one of the most sufficient things here is that fact that Russian Federation has any will to return us these territories, not by transitional administration, not direct to us. Now we see that they want to build such vertical structures as this occupied administration is today, with the help of Russian, not Russian, but controlled by Russians, structure as Внешторг service and something like this. And if we turn to the experience of LPR, so-called LPR, we will see that it's totally under the control of FSB. And I don't see any steps by Russian Federation which can lead us to some peaceful agreement,
conflict resolution.
And to conflict resolution, exactly.
And do you see Russia-led militants ever agreeing to this new conditions of controlling the territories? I mean, the UN administrations instead of the governments?
You know, I see that they can agree only on that conditions which will be really sufficient and pleasant to them, not to us. If it will be some administration in which we will see such satellite countries of Russia as Belarus, as maybe Kazakhstan, in that case they can allow it, but it will be the hybrid operation, not UN mission.
Mm-hmm. So what is your general assessment of this plan, of this document that is being reviewed right now in the German Bundestag?
My general assessment is, you know, I just need to say that it have both advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages is understanding that the Minsk agreements are actually dead, and they need impulse to be
effective, yes. They need a restart.
Restarted. And one of the disadvantages is sort of illusions about the UN, about the Russians' will to stop the conflict. They don't want it at all, yes. And they don't want real negotiations. They want to dictate us their conditions, which will let them to control all over the Ukraine by these territories, not only on the occupied territories, but control on Ukraine by these territories, by producing new escalation, by producing new conflicts, by producing instability. And that's their point.
Well, let's see how the new power, the new Ukrainian government that is expected to take office soon, how they will evolve their strategy on fighting the Russian aggression. Thank you so much for your interesting comments, and thank you for being a guest today in our studio.
Thank you.
That was Maria Kucherenko, analyst at the Center for Civil Society Studies. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I am Oles Garjuk. Goodbye.